Hello, welcome. This is the Jones Library Building Committee meeting for Monday, January 27th, 2025 at 3 p.m. This meeting is being recorded pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and extended again by Chapter 2 of Acts 2023. This meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. A hyperlink to the meeting is posted on the town's online calendar. This is a meeting of the Jones Library Building Committee and is being conducted via remote participation. So I'm going to do a roll call right now to check to make sure that the committee's here. So, and that their video is working properly. So first off, the chair, Austin Serrata, is not here. I am Christine Gray Mullen. I am the vice chair. So I'm starting this meeting and I will check in with the other meetings. Please acknowledge. Farah Amin.
Here.
Paul Bockelman.
Present.
George Hicks Richards.
Here.
Alex Lefebvre.
Here.
Pamela Rooney.
Here.
Sharon Shari.
Here.
And Melissa Zawadski.
Here.
Great. Thank you for that. All right. This a reminder that the meeting is being recorded and will be updated on the Town of Amherst YouTube channel by members of the IT staff. A link to this uploaded recording will be found at the top and the end of the posted approved minutes for this meeting. The meeting is now called to order. I do have one housekeeping rule to remind everyone, if you can, please mute yourselves when you're not talking. It helps keep down the background noise. Okay, next thing, I'm looking at the agenda. We have finished with section 1. Section 2 is the chair report. There's not really any report, but I will detail how this meeting is going to run. So thank you for coming, everyone. I can see as of right now, we have 44 attendees and there's 18 panelists. Some of those people will be moving around as I further discuss. So the purpose of today's meeting is to continue the section 106 historic preservation review and consultation process. Public comment will happen, but it happens at the end of the meeting, at least an hour from now. It's the practice that the amount of time that will be allotted to each public comment will depend on how many people want to speak. So when we get to that point, you'll be asked to raise your hand if you would like to give a public comment. And at that time, the facilitators will make a judgment call, whether it's from 3 minutes to 1 minute. So please be patient, and that way everyone will get to speak. So we also encourage the public to submit their comments via the town section 106 website, and you can put your comments there. The link to do so was posted with the announcement of this meeting. So at this point, we have Angela Mills, the executive assistant for the town, is helping us with this Zoom meeting. She will be moving Jones Library Building Committee members back to attendees, and she'll be moving the consulting parties for this meeting into the panelist section of the Zoom. At this point, I want to acknowledge that we have multiple panelists attending today, and I will name those that I'm aware of here and thank them for coming. So first off, we have Ginny Adams, a Public Archaeology Laboratory, PAL, that's her organization, a historic preservation consultant providing subject matter expertise to the town and the library. Next, we have Mara Schulman, and Jake Kuhn of Collaborative Resolutions Group, CRG. And they're going to be facilitating the whole meeting today with the consulting parties discussion. Next, I'm acknowledging Brana Simon, Executive Director and State Historic Preservation Officer, and Elizabeth Sherva, the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. They're both from Mass Historic Commission, or known as MHC. We have Maureen Amyat, Executive Director, and Andrea Bono-Bunker, Program Officer of the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, MBLC. Next, we have Max Sickler. He's a Historic Preservation Specialist, and we have Rachel Magum, an Assistant Director, and we have Bill Marzella, Program Analyst. They are of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, or ACHP. Do we have all three of those? Are they being? I can't tell if they're.
Hey,
Next,
Christine. Oh,
yeah.
This is Bill. I don't know if Rachel has joined us, but Max and I are here, so thank you.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that, and welcome. Next, I have Ann Peason. She's a Federal Preservation Officer with the National Endowment for Humanities, or NEH. Okay, are there any other federal or state officials being moved in that I don't have on my list? Okay, so
Christine,
Yeah.
I'd like to recognize Lily Stowe Ehrlichman from Representative Dome's office in the audience.
Wonderful.
Town Council President Link Riesemer is in the audience.
Wonderful.
I think that's
So,
everybody. Thank you.
It's Angela interrupting. I'm sorry. Can I ask that if you're in the attendee room and you should be in the panelist room, that you raise your hand, please? Because some people aren't labeled per their name on my list. Thank you.
I'm looking here. Yes, thank you. Hold, please. I'm checking the list too. Okay. Yeah, I do see a couple of Jones Library Building Committee members still in there.
Yeah, I am trying to move.
I know you are. There's so many people to move. Thank you. No problem. So once Angela has managed to move everybody to their proper place, we will be transitioning to the facilitators, Mara and Jake. Are you both there?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Welcome. Thank you for doing this. I'm just checking. I'll also remind people who later, if they're dialing in on the phone and they want to do public comment, to press *9 when they're raising their hand to speak. And people who are using a computer or a tablet, they should click on the raise hand button at the bottom of their screen to let the chair know that they want to speak, or the facilitators know. Okay. So I see 35 panelists. Angela, are you still? Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to move the JLBC members over to the attendee room.
I see that. Thank you. Sharon, do you see anyone else there we should acknowledge?
I'm sorry, not that I can tell.
So with your permission, it's Angela again. Okay, she finally moved over. I was having problems with Jane Wald moving over. So Sharon, for clarification, you're staying in the panelist room, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and are we turning everything over to CRG? And Christine, am I moving you over?
Yes.
Okay.
So I will say thank you. And we'll turn it over to our facilitators.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Christine. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake, and I'm here with my colleague, Mara Schulman, and we are facilitators from Collaborative Resolutions Group, which is a community mediation center that serves Western Massachusetts in New Hampshire, Franklin, and Hampden counties. Our organization's mission is to increase individuals and organizations' capacity to communicate effectively, manage differences, resolve conflict, and work collaboratively. And we have been hired by the town of Amherst to facilitate this public meeting. The two of us are neutral facilitators whose goal it is to ensure that this meeting is run smoothly, inclusively, and respectfully.
Thanks, Jake. I'm Mara, and I'm going to start by just giving a little bit of sort of overview. We want to make sure that it's clear who everyone is and which organization they're here on behalf of. If you are able, could you please change your name in the Zoom title to your first name and the organization that you're here representing. That way we can be really clear when we call on consulting parties which organization they're affiliated with. So I'll give everyone a second just to make that change if you're able.
Usually in Zoom, that means that you hover over your name as you see it and then click on the ellipses, and it should give you the rename option, and then you type in exactly as requested, first name and your organization.
Angela, when I try and do so, it's not letting me save the change.
So what we actually have to do is you have to click on participants in the bottom, find your name, click more, and then click change panelist appearance. And that will be where you can change it so it will be visible to everyone.
Is that working for people? No? Yes. Okay, great. Wonderful. I do see a hand raised. Are you facing technical difficulties with this? No? Okay. All right, so once everyone has changed their name, first name, comma, or dash organization, that will be really helpful for us as we facilitate. I'm going to start by doing a quick roll call for all of the consulting parties. If you hear your name, please unmute and say here or present. That way we can be confident that everyone's mics are working before we start the conversation. And I want to just make sure that I don't miss anybody either. So I'm just going to call out the consulting parties in alphabetical order, and the names that I see here on my list in representing each of those organizations. I have the Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce and Jacob. If you could just unmute and indicate if you're here.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Amherst Business Improvement District, I have Tony.
Here.
Wonderful. Amherst College Community Engagement, I have Sarah.
Here.
The Amherst Historical Commission, Madeline. And maybe Hetty as well.
I'm here, but Madeline was unable to attend today. Something came up at the office at the last minute.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The Amherst Historic Preservation Coalition, I have Jeff and also Maria.
Jeff here.
And Maria here.
Wonderful. The Amherst Historical Society and Museum, I have Liz and Gigi.
Yes.
Here.
Thank you. I have Ancestral Bridges, Annika and Michael.
Yes, Michael is here. And
Anika is here.
Anika.
Anika?
Yeah.
Anika, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm here.
Mispronounced your name, Anika. Burnett Art Gallery, I have Eliza.
It's actually Elisa, and I tried to change my name to put in Burnett, but it didn't save for whatever reason. Sorry.
Okay, well, thank you, Elisa. The Downtown Amherst Historic District Committee, Nancy and Elizabeth.
Yes, I'm here, and Elizabeth is here. But I tried to change my name, but it's not showing it unless I take my picture away. I can take that. I can do that.
And I'm Elizabeth and I'm here.
Thank you. We'll give folks another chance when I'm done with roll call to see if we can fix the problem with the names. Emily Dickinson Museum, Jane.
Here.
Thank you. The Friends of Jones Library System, Ginny.
Here.
Frost Library, Amherst College, Martin.
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was Kent also present
Yes,
for
yes,
Friends of
David.
Jones Library? I apologize, Kent. Jones Library, Sherry and Catherine.
Here, Sharon.
Sharon and Catherine.
Yes, I'm here. Catherine's here.
I think I need reading glasses. I'm having a little trouble with this small font here. Okay, Literacy Project, Colleen. No? Okay. And the last one here is UMass Amherst University Relations, Tony.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, so just to give us one more chance to correct the problem with the names, if you hover over your name in the participants list, you should be able to rename it there.
Well, while we're making these changes, Sharon, Sherry, it's Angela. I'm noticing that Bob Parent has his hand up. Was he not supposed to be moved out of this panelist room?
I think that's entirely up to him.
And Max has his name, his hand raised as well. Is there a
No, I just was also having issues with changing my name, but I had success with going down to the last option, change name tag and virtual background, and I was successfully able to add my organization title to my name tag that way.
Wow, thanks for the tip.
Is that when you're looking at your name or when you're looking at the participants?
It's just if you go to those three dots in the upper right-hand corner of your...
Of my picture.
Yes.
Because I can...
This should be the last.
Yeah. I mean...
Change name tag and virtual background.
It did change it when I take my picture away. And I don't think I'm the only one that's happened to. So, thanks.
Did I miss anyone? Anyone here who is a consulting party whose name I did not call?
Hi, this is Colleen from the Literacy Project. I am here. I just forgot to come in as a panelist in the beginning.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, there are, I'm going to move along. If you're really struggling with making that change, I think we'll be able to identify you anyway, since we have all names, at least the first names. There are different parts of this meeting. I'm going to sort of provide a roadmap so that we're all on the same page about what to expect as the meeting progresses. The Section 106 review process addresses changes to historic properties in light of overall programmatic and public use. And I do believe that we might be sharing a slide to illustrate this point, but the town of Amherst has determined that the Jones Library renovation and expansion project will have adverse effects on historic properties in the town of Amherst. So the purpose of today's meeting and conversation is to build on the previous one we had in October, as well as the written input that has been received from consulting parties, especially from the Massachusetts Historic Commission, MHC, and from the public. The task today is to discuss measures to resolve the adverse effects and to discuss any mitigation proposals. The first portion of this meeting, which we're going to launch into shortly, will be dedicated to hearing from the consulting parties whose roll call we just completed. The second portion of the meeting that will occur later in the afternoon will be dedicated to hearing from members of the public. All of the feedback received, both in the first part of the meeting and the second, will be used in crafting a memorandum of agreement following this meeting. We'll also be hearing from Ginny Adams, the subject matter expert that we heard recognized earlier, to share specifically about the unresolved areas of adverse effects in more detail. I'm going to turn it over to Jake to talk about norms before we begin.
Thanks, Mara. So before we begin to open the floor for a comment from the consulting parties, we would like to establish some norms or ground rules for this meeting. We understand there will be differences of opinion that might be expressed at this meeting. That is to be expected. At Collaborative Resolutions Group, we understand that conflict is inevitable. However, how we manage conflict and how we communicate when there are differences does make a world of difference and will determine whether conflict will be constructive or lead to harm. Accordingly, we are establishing the following 3 norms for communication during this meeting. The first is to show respect for other people. This means that we are agreeing not to use any disparaging language, and we'll make sure that we are not using body language or facial expressions that undermine a culture of respect. That's number 1. Number 2, show respect for the space. We know that it's challenging to gather a large group of people to discuss an issue where there may be differences of opinion, and sometimes that it can be even more challenging to meet virtually. So we are asking everyone to agree to show respect for the space, which means that we are all agreeing that we act within the parameters for participation that the facilitators have established. Specifically, people are agreeing to speak when it's their designated time to speak and not at other times. It also means that people are agreeing that when it's their designated time to speak, that their comments will be directly responsive to the scope of the meeting, which Mara just went over. That's number 2. And number 3 is to speak for yourself or the organization you are here representing. This means that we are agreeing that when it's your turn to speak, you will speak for yourself or the organization you're here representing and not for other people. Everyone who wants to speak will have the chance to speak and will be invited to share their perspective. Those are our ground rules and norms for communication. Now we're going to hear from Ginny Adams from the Public Archaeology Lab in more detail about the unresolved areas of adverse effects. These are the areas where our discussion will focus today. Ginny, over to you.
Thank you, Jake, and good afternoon, everyone. I think I'll have the first slide, please. While we're waiting for that, I'll just say again that as Jake and Mara have said, that we're focusing today on the unresolved areas of adverse effect in a consultation meeting dialogue. And Section 106 has 4 stages of consultation among the consulting parties. The first is initiate the process. The second is to identify historic properties. The third is to assess adverse effects. And the fourth is to resolve adverse effects. We are at the 4th point right now in resolving adverse effects. Having identified historic properties and the town has assessed the adverse effects and analyzed alternatives to avoid and minimize them in consultation and coordination with the Massachusetts Historical Commission, State Historic Preservation Office, and the consulting parties with input from the public. During this time, an archaeological survey of the work areas on the library and Stronghouse properties was conducted, which found that much of the area was previously disturbed and there are no significant archaeological resources present. So our discussion focuses on the library itself and the adjacent historic properties. In the course of, okay, now thank you. Here's the first slide. So just to go back for a moment, this slide expresses the fundamental goal of the Section 106 consultation to ensure that the agency's decision, in this case, the town, on carrying out an undertaking is well informed regarding effects to historic properties and the views of others regarding those effects. And here is the 4-step process that I just mentioned, and we are in the resolve adverse effects point of that process. So there are 8 topics of adverse effects that were identified and presented in the alternatives analysis report. 4 of which MHC had specifically requested additional information on, and those are listed in this slide. The first 2 items have been resolved by action of the trustees. The slate roofing, which will be replaced with natural slate, and the stone cut for the book drop has been eliminated from the plans, and the existing conditions will remain. The other items, we've acknowledged that there's some overlap in these, but we've grouped the remaining adverse effects by exterior and interior topics to allow for the discussion. And the first grouping is the new addition, size, scale, and massing. Exterior, which involves also visual changes to the setting of the Amherst Downtown Historic District and the Stronghouse, the location of 2 unique historic windows, and the removal of the remaining west rear elements. And on the interior, the loss of 2 interior secondary staircases and changes to circulation, and the loss of 20% of the original interior woodwork. Our discussion will also touch on and develop potential mitigation measures to be included. The next slide. Oh, there we are. Thank you. To be included in a memorandum of agreement. And the examples shown here in this slide of potential mitigation measures, narrative and photographic archival documentation, interpretive presentations and displays, rehabilitation of remaining historic fabric in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards and design review. These measures were included in the alternatives analysis report, and they align with examples from the National Endowment for the Humanities memorandum of agreement examples that have been posted on the town website for some time. So hopefully everyone has had a chance to look at those and the alternatives analysis report. And with that, I will turn back to Mara and Jake. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We're going to start by hearing from representatives of the Massachusetts Historical Commission, acknowledging their unique role as the State Historic Preservation Officer. And then after that, I will invite the representatives from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners to speak. Following that, we will hear from other consulting parties. So if I could turn it over to Brana and Elizabeth from the Mass Historical Commission. And maybe we could take the slides down as well. Thank you, so we can see everybody.
This is Brana Simon. I am the State Historic Preservation Officer. And I don't have any prepared remarks. I wasn't told I was expected to speak. I thought this was a consultation meeting where we would hear the views of consulting and interested parties with their suggestions for additional changes or mitigation measures. We are still reviewing all of the comments that we receive every single day and are have not yet drafted our response to the project proponent, who is also the Section 106 agent, Bob Parent. So sorry, I can't be of any more assistance here. We are a consulting party. Everyone puts us on a pedestal. But if you look at the Section 106 regulations, yes, the SHPO is a obligatory consulting party. But it doesn't mean that the SHPO has any approval or veto power, all we can do is consult. So we are looking forward to further consultation to resolve these adverse effects. We know and we recognize the townspeople's love for the historic library. We really compliment all of them for having such activism, which is shows us that historic preservation really does mean something to the communities. And that's reassuring to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Brana. And certainly we will be engaging in a conversation. And at that point, if you hear something you'd like to respond to, you'll have other opportunities to share. We just wanted to give you the opportunity first to speak. We'll turn it over to Maureen and Andrea, should they have something to share that they'd like to share from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. But again, we'll be engaging in a conversation after that.
Hi, I'm Andrea Bono-Bunker. I am the library building consultant for the MBLC. We also do not have prepared remarks. I will just mention that our role in design and the development of the drawings focuses on functionality, efficiency of workflow, oversight of spaces, safety and security for the operation of the library. And we understand there is a delicate balance. Many of our libraries are addition renovation projects or restoration projects. So we understand that delicate balance and we're happy to answer questions as this dialogue continues.
Thank you, Andrea. So let's launch into the dialogue portion of the consulting parties. I'm going to ask the representatives of the various organizations that are here today to raise your hands if you wish to speak. Given how many participants we have and the limited amount of time, if you could please keep your comment to a minute, that would be much appreciated. And if your organization has already spoken, we'd ask you to let others speak first before raising your hand for a second time. We'll spend about 10 or 15 minutes discussing the resolution of adverse effects for changes to the exterior of the building that includes size, scale, and massing. And then we'll spend another 10 to 15 minutes discussing the resolution of adverse effects to the building's interior. We'll devote the majority of the time to discuss and develop potential mitigation measures to be included in a memorandum of agreement. And I understand that Jane Wald of the Emily Dickinson Museum may have to leave early. So if you have something you'd like to share, we want to invite you to speak first, and then we'll turn to those people who have raised their hands.
Yes, thank
Jane?
you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I do need to leave in just a moment, but I hope to come back in toward the end of the session. So I apologize for that conflict. So the information shared at the beginning of this Zoom session is stating exactly what this session is for. Is a little bit new to me. It wasn't entirely clear from the invitation what that would be about. However, I think I just want to state that you know, I've been a member of the historic preservation community in and around Amherst for a very long time, and also appreciate how dedicated the citizens of this town are to its precious historic resources. I also recognize that the Jones Library is one of those unique features of our town. It's one of the character-defining buildings here in Amherst. Yet, you know, ultimately the library's purpose is to serve its community, and the necessity of making choices to mitigate adverse effects on historic fabric to the greatest extent possible is part of this same public service responsibility. And each of these goals really can support the other. The library is faced with kind of a welter of regulations that may not always be in sync, and I believe is trying to do the best it can to fulfill its public mission, while also preserving to the greatest extent possible the historic appearance, its exterior appearance, while needing to undertake changes to advance its public program in a changing landscape of technology and use and certainly identity for libraries in the 21st century. So that's what I wanted to say at this moment, and I hope to join you again later in the session.
Thank you, Jane. I understand that Tony from UMass Amherst University Relations may also have to leave early. And if that's the case and you'd like to share something now, we'll invite you to do that.
Thank you, Mara. I have two statements, one from the bid and also from UMass. They're probably very similar. So, but I did want to, on behalf of the bid, want to underscore the importance of moving this project forward on behalf of the downtown business community represented by the Amherst Business Improvement District. The Jones Library which, as we all know, is prominently situated in our central business district, is an arts, literature, and cultural anchor institution and economic driver for our downtown. The proposed renovation and expansion project will only increase the veracity of this statement. A vibrant, reconstructed library will amplify its impact, driving foot traffic, boosting small businesses, and increasing the quality of life in Amherst. Additionally, I want to emphasize that the Jones Library has gone through a more than rigorous public process of community and stakeholder engagement and has developed a plan that mitigates changes to the historic fabric of the building to the extent possible. In summary, we believe the benefits of this project far outweigh the impacts, and my only outstanding concern is the swiftness with which we can bring years of thoughtful work and investment in this project to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, I see that we do have a hand raised, and I'd like to invite consulting parties to speak to the exterior details. So I'll start with Hetty. Please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you everybody for joining in this process today. And I'm particularly glad that our state partners at the MHC are joining us today and for reviewing the project so far. As Madeleine isn't able to join me as the other half of our consulting party, I'd like to address the issue that she would have talked about if she had been at this meeting. She would have talked about the size and scale of the new addition. And we believe that the issue of an addition needs to be mitigated. We'd like to scale back the addition so that it reads better as a secondary structure to the historic 1928 Jones Library building on Amity Street. We also think that mitigation needs to be accommodated, commensurate with the potential impact of this project. I think everyone here is familiar with that, with the potential impact of this project. I really love my library, and so what I'm saying on behalf of the AHC is to consider a mitigation for the size and scale of the project. The dimensions of the new addition far outweigh the dimensions on the west side of the existing building, the 1928 building. And I think that could be changed or mitigated in some way to resolve the adverse effects. So I have comments about the interior, but I won't make those now because I don't think this is the right moment for those, if I'm understanding the process correctly. Like Jane, there's a lot of new little bits to the to the way this meeting has been set up that I wasn't aware of at the time. So I think I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Hetty, and I apologize for the confusion. We'll try to be as clear and transparent as we can be. So for the next 10 minutes or so, we'll be talking about the exterior, and then we'll transition to a conversation about interior. So I'll hand it over to Liz now. Please, if you don't mind, unmuting yourself and turning your camera on.
There we go. Sorry, technical difficulties here. I am Liz Larson. I'm the executive director at the Amherst Historical Society, which is often in these meetings referred to as the Strong House. We are the immediate abutter to the library, and thus the exterior addition is going to, I believe, have the most impact on our view from here at the Historical Society. However, I believe that the opportunity and need to address this will actually enhance the view from my office window. This past fall, we were delighted to have the chance to be a part of the Landscape Architecture Studio Seminar at UMass. As part of it, we worked with the students to envision possibilities for the gardens and outdoor areas of the Historical Society in relation to our neighbor, the Jones Library. The design concepts that the students presented at the end of the semester really demonstrated to us how thoughtful and intentional landscaping can affect the way a space is perceived and how people move around and through a space, both physically and visually. I would suggest that any perceived negative impact of the rear addition can be addressed through thoughtful landscape planning and architecture that, in the end, would add to the downtown outdoor spaces for the public and enhance outdoor programming for both the Historical Society and the Jones Library. So that is a suggestion that the Historical Society has for addressing the perceived massing issues with the rear addition. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. I'll hand it over to Elizabeth now.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Sharp. I'm on the Local Historic District Commission. I have 3 comments about the exterior. The first is I do believe that the addition, the massing of it is simply too large. It doesn't read like an addition. It reads like a massive building sort of overwhelming it. I'm fully in favor of an addition. It's just that that one needs to be scaled back. I can think of one, now my first point is one small thing you could do on the west side is that there is that break between the original building and the addition, and it's like a 5-foot break. If you could do something better or more enhanced with the design to understand so that people can really understand the difference between the old and the new, that would be a help on the west side. The second thing on the exterior is I'd like to see the louvered shutters put back on. They are part of the 1928 design. They're mentioned in the Historic Structures Report as being integral to the design and the appearance of the Jones Library as a domestic building or in a domestic appearance. And I know you have one of the shutters and I understand the hardware is still there. I think you should go and put them back on exactly where they were in 1928, which is the facade, and then some on the right side and on the east side and some on the west side as well. Third and finally, the pineapple above the scroll pediment doorway, it had leaves that were handcrafted out of sheet metal or something else, put those back on so it looks like a proper pineapple. I mean, historic preservation is in the beautiful details, and I think you don't want to drop those too. So definitely put the shutters back on, pay attention to the juncture between the addition and the building, the original building, and make it a proper pineapple. So those are my 3 comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to Jeff now.
Thanks, Mara. Yeah, the Amherst Historic Preservation Coalition also loves the Jones Library. We also feel the addition is much too large. I'm looking at standards 9 and 10, the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. 9 says new additions, exterior alterations or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, architecture features to protect historic integrity of the property and its environment. And as Elizabeth noted, the massing is clearly out of scale with the historic building. It also looks much different. Its materials are much more modern. It's glass. I also look at Secretary Standards number 10, new additions and adjacent or related new construction shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. That is clearly not happening with the current design. Some sort of separation and much smaller addition might resolve to those standards, but as it stands now, they do not. And I'm also concerned that this large addition is visible from 3 different historic districts. The Amherst Central Business District, the Gaylord Prospect District, and the Lincoln Sunset District. And that should be considered. So we'd like to see a much smaller addition, and it's separated from the historic building. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning over to Michael. Michael, you may be muted. Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Thank you very much. As a history major who's always loved history, who lives in a house that dates from the 1840s, you know, historical preservation would mean that my house would have no insulation. What in old New England was called the necessary would still be in a clapboard shed out in the backyard. And of course, there would be not only no indoor plumbing, but no electricity. We can, of course, strive to be faithful to the historical details and in the process, kill this entire project and prevent the Jones Library from being a 21st century living resource for the community. And that, I respectfully submit, is what needs to be the focus. And as I pointed out last time, when through an unfortunate error, I didn't get to talk till almost everyone had left. In the 1920s, neither Anika Lopes nor I, as a Jew and her as a person of color, could have lived in many residential neighborhoods in Amherst. Amherst was a very different place. The only job she could have gotten was as a menial worker, which happened to some of her ancestors in that era. I absolutely could not have gotten in the front door at what was then Mass Aggie or Amherst College. I think life is change, and we need to reflect the realities of the 21st century. And yes, that may mean that what is built may not exactly replicate exterior-wise what was there. It may be larger than what was there. But the most important thing is that the library continue its basic mission, which is to be a living resource for the entire community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I see that Martin has raised his hand.
Thank you. Martin Garner, Director of the Library at Amherst College. It's been noted that the library community, library populations that's being served by the Jones does include the students at Amherst College as well as other universities, and there's reference made to our state-of-the-art facilities. And I'm coming to you from my 1966 mid-century building that is not state-of-the-art, and want to speak in support of having a properly, adequately sized addition, which I believe the current plans has, to provide the necessary programming that the Jones can provide. Our students cannot get everything that they need from us because we have our focus, and they do depend on the Jones for access to materials like children's materials in our education studies department, and also the ability to interact with the community in a way that is more easily accessible to the public, because there are some cultural barriers to getting people to come to our campus. And so I wholeheartedly support having a structure that from the street does preserve as much as possible of the historic look, but internally provides the setup that's needed for the public library to be able to serve the community in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks to everybody for sharing your thoughts about the exterior. I see Kent has raised his hand.
Yes, I represent the Friends of the Jones Libraries, which is a supportive organization that is as interested in as much in the historic preservation of the assets of this building as anyone else. But they're also highly conscious that the needs for a library in 21st century Amherst are completely different from those in the early 20th century, 1928 to be exact. We need a much larger library. About approximately 225,000 people go through the doors of this building every year in a normal year. It cannot possibly be accommodated within the size of the building that is currently there. And in fact, the library went through a massive
I
planning
don't have it right
exercise.
now, Andy. I don't have time.
Hello?
If you could please mute yourself if you're not speaking, that way we don't have any background noise. Please continue, Kent.
The library went through a massive planning exercise that determined the size of this library, and it simply cannot be reduced. The MBLC, the state's expert on sizing libraries, agreed. 2/3 of the voters in a referendum in 2021 agreed. 500 donors to our capital campaign so far agreed. It would be lovely if we had all kinds of space. It's a tight lot. There isn't much room, and we need the space. So shrinking the size of this addition is just not possible. To my untrained eye, I do not see the massing problem. I do see exactly the distinction between the old building and the new addition. There shouldn't be a problem there. Thank you very much for considering this.
Thank you. And I see Maria has raised their hand.
Thank you. I am going to make some references back to the PNF that was submitted in February of 2024, which stated, quote, "The work will comply with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation." And I think that that is what we should be doing. And to do that, we have to deal with the fact that the size, scale, and massing is not appropriate. I would also like to talk about the preservation brief from the National Park Service, which states, "A new exterior addition to a historic building should be considered in a rehabilitation project only after determining that requirements for the new or adaptive use cannot be successfully met by altering non-significant interior spaces." So we've been given some numbers here about to justify this, but I will submit that the size of this addition has not adequately addressed the possibilities for having some of this programming that is currently planned for this to be in other spaces around town. There is a new school building that's going to exist. It's going to have lots of space. We have 2 branch libraries, and we do have UMass and Amherst College, and if they would like to offer some space for some of these programs, that would be, I'm sure, much appreciated as well. So I think the notion that the size of the addition cannot possibly be any smaller is a false narrative. And I would like to make a request of the folks that are running the meeting. Can we, it would be great if we could stay focused on the issues at hand, which are the adverse effects and what to do about them. We can talk about how people feel about the library, and I can talk about the 1,100 people who signed a petition that said, "Stop this project." But I think we want to focus on the adverse effects.
Thank you, Maria. And we've come to the time that we need to transition to the next topic. So thank you everyone for sharing your comments and observations and thoughts about how to mitigate adverse effects with respect to the exterior features. Let's turn to the interior details. And I want to acknowledge that there is some overlap on issues with respect to size, scale, and the discussion of interior spaces. So I'll ask first for ideas that have not been shared yet today during the first portion of our conversation. And then if there are ideas that overlap with the conversation we just had regarding exterior details, please feel free at that point to share them. We'll use the same kind of format. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak. I'll call on you based on your name, and I'm keeping track of the organizations that have spoken so that we're hoping to get everyone an opportunity to speak who wants to. So Hetty, thank you for raising your hand. You may please go ahead.
Thank you, Mara. I'm going to talk about the interior paneling, another adverse effect, and exactly how much gets removed if the demolition and addition goes ahead. Interior changes to the walls with paneling were proposed when these impacted the changes to accommodate the book sorter in the historic library director's office. As this is no longer a part of the scheme, i.e. the book sorter, and the hole in the front facade has been removed that was also proposed to accommodate this machine, then it seems to me that there's a way to mitigate the issue of the paneling. There's no reason to remove paneled walls on the interior that connect the 1928 building to the 1993 building between the library director's office and the addition. The addition obviously is outsized and should be scaled back. Thank you.
Thank you, Hetty. Does anyone else want to speak? Okay, Jeff, please, with respect to interior details.
Yeah, again, I'd like to quote the Secretary of the Interior standards. Number 1 is a property shall be used for its historic purpose or be placed in a new use that requires minimal change to the defining characteristics of the building and its site and environment. Standard number 2, the historic character of a property shall be retained and preserved. The removal of historic materials or alterations of features and spaces that characterize a property shall be avoided. I would argue that the Philippine mahogany millwork, which has been exquisitely crafted, carved, is maybe the foremost, at least in the interior, the foremost defining characteristic of the historic character of the building. And the idea that we will be removing 20% of it is just, I think, very destructive to the historic fabric. I would also argue with the need for tearing down walls to expand the circulation pattern or expand the rooms in the library. It was designed to resemble a Connecticut Valley house, not a 21st century library, and we should honor that. The number of visitors each year, most recently was 142,000, not the 225,000 that the capital campaign has been presenting. It's just also the MBLC grant stated the library population is 51,000. That is pretty ludicrous. The population of Amherst is 39,000, and there are 3 college and university libraries in town. So I just would argue against the need to tear down this very irreplaceable millwork in the Jones Library. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Michael?
Thank you. A different aspect of the theme I sounded before is that in 1928, the notion that the story of people of color in Amherst, Anika's family, 6 generations being only one example, I mean, that would have been given very short shrift. There certainly was no place for anything having to do with the story of people in color, either historically or presently. I think one of the key reasons Ancestral Bridges is here is there needs to be space in that library. Number 1, for people of color who were simply in a back corner in the 1920s, to be encouraged to take advantage of the new library, and 2, for them to find at least something about their history. Once again, the historic physical preservation can effectively be used to kill that, and I very much hope that will not happen. We are talking about people who are the descendants of those who were bought and sold as property, including here in the Pioneer Valley. And we can't change that history, but part of what this library renovation is all about in the 21st century is including that as part of the history. And yes, as a lover of history who treasures New England, if some of the physical details have to be changed, then so be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hetty, before I call on you, I'm going to give people who haven't had a chance to talk to the interior question a chance. Kent, please go ahead. Oh, Kent, I believe you're muted.
Yes, thank you. With respect to moving spaces, removing walls, the needs of the Friends of the Jones Library wants the town library to be directly in the center of Amherst. It wants the town library to be in this building. In order to do that, however, dramatic changes need to be made. A new addition needs to be put on. I think Feingold Alexander, known for its historic preservation creativity, has come up with a particularly good solution to the many, many conflicts that occurred in providing a 21st century library in this early 20th century building. It is not the case that the library has abandoned the book sorter. We definitely need a book sorter, but down the road, we can't afford it now. 24 other libraries around the Commonwealth have book sorters. And some of them with circulation smaller than ours now, not to say what it will be when this edition is completed. And the MBLC may want to weigh in on some of the issues with respect to security, which is very different from the earliest 20th century. With respect to building codes, which are very different. With respect to workflow, which is very different. And Feingold Alexander has done a fantastic job accommodating many, many, many different conflicts, coming up with a solution that will preserve the assets of this building in a way that would not be preserved if the library moved somewhere else. We could have built a building a lot less expensively in another part of the town and abandoned this building. But we want the library to be in this historic building. In order to do that, we need to make some modest changes and keep the library there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Let's turn it over to Andrea.
Thank you, Mara. I just wanted to address from the MBLC's regulations and our perspective. Even though there is not an automated materials handling unit anymore, you need that space for the carts and the amount of work that needs to be done in order to sort the books, put them on proper carts, bring them to proper locations, the way that that particular area of the existing building is structured makes it very difficult in its existing state to be able to perform that work without creating pinch points. So it's important for the operation of the library and for workflow efficiency to have that area open, as the circulation desk does not have enough room behind it for that type of operation. And in terms of this is going back to the previous discussion, the previous 10 minutes, but we have worked with the architects to help find efficiencies, and we've allowed a reduction in size in this building, but no further reductions are allowable, as your programmatic elements will no longer be able to be incorporated if you cut down the size. And I think we have stated in a letter before that if these particular, if the way in which the architects have designed the circulation area and even the upper floor, if that does not remain and the square footage is not met, the programmatic elements are not met, the building actually has to become bigger in order to accommodate those. So in terms of workflow efficiency and functionality, that is our perspective from the MBLC to make sure that it is a 21st century functioning library in order to meet the needs of the community. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrea. Catherine, please.
I just wanted to speak briefly to the woodwork. I know I understand and agree that it is absolutely beautiful. And that is one of the reasons that it has been such a strong motivation to keep as much as we possibly can throughout this building project. And I know the director's office and the administrative offices have been mentioned several times. And I know Mr. Lee's latest letter highlights the fireplace surrounded by the Philippine mahogany in the receptionist's office. And it is beautiful, and it is not going anywhere. That particular wall is not going anywhere. And none of the fireplaces and the surrounds are in this new building. I also wanted to mention that from a historic standpoint, the administrative offices, the business manager's office, the receptionist's office, the outer office, they have already been changed completely from when they were built. You can see in the one of the photographs from Ginny's slideshow was the original Boatwood Room, which is now the receptionist's office. And if you look now, the doorway that is on the left side of the fireplace, which is now a closet, was actually originally a door into the director's office, because that was a separate room. So we have made changes over the years, and we are a library. That's what we need to do. And we need to do them, and I believe we are going to be doing them with the greatest respect to the builders and the original trustees and Samuel Minot Jones and all of those who originally dreamed up this building and planned it. And I believe we're going to be doing the best we can to honor those and yet continue to serve the population of Amherst. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. We'll hear from Jacob and then Hetty before ending this portion of the conversation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting the Chamber to participate in this important discussion. My comments are not parsed out between exterior and interior effects, but I'd still like to share them. So the Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce has consistently supported this project, first expressing our endorsement in 2022, and our support remains firm. We still recognize the importance of addressing potential adverse effects on the library's historic character. We feel that the library is not only a vital historic and civic asset, but also critical to as an economic driver for downtown Amherst. With over 225,000 annual visitors, it generates significant foot traffic to the area and extending to local businesses. Research shows that similar types of library renovations result in like a 40% increase in patronage. If this project achieves comparable results, that would bring an additional 100,000 visits annually to downtown Amherst, providing a much needed boost to our local businesses. We understand that the concerns have been raised about adverse effects, particularly related to the slate roof and the book drop. I think that the library has demonstrated good faith in addressing these concerns by making concessions on both elements. Additionally, the architects have incorporated thoughtfully designed solutions to preserve key features of the 1928 building while also modernizing it to meet the needs of a very heavily used public space. The project has been subjected to rigorous review over 10 years with ample opportunity for public input and analysis, and further delays risk not only escalating costs, but also jeopardizing the ability to implement these carefully crafted mitigation measures. The Chamber believes it's crucial to balance the preservation of Amherst historic assets with a practical need to create a library that can meet demands of a growing and diverse community. The expanded and modernized library will also address critical gaps in our civic infrastructure, providing community meeting and event spaces that will further strengthen downtown Amherst as a hub for cultural and economic activity. And I'll just close by saying the Chamber urges all parties to finalize agreements on this proposed mitigation so that this incredibly vital project can move forward. We're confident that the library's approach strikes an appropriate balance between preserving its historic character and enhancing its functionality for our future generations. So thank you for consulting with the Chamber, for opportunity to share our perspective on how this project can mitigate the adverse effects while also driving community benefits for Amherst.
Thank you. We haven't heard from Sarah from Amherst College, so I'll turn to her.
Hi, everyone.
As Mara said, my name is Sarah. I am a staff member here at Amherst College and work in the college's Center for Community Engagement. I've been following this project for 6 years, and I think I have lost a year of my life to meetings. But I have learned so much. And I think that what I want to share, since we're talking about the interior, which is also related to the massing and the exterior, is that, you know, over the 6 years that I've been going to meetings and learning about this project, there has been so much thoughtful work put in to mitigation strategies to balance exactly what Catherine and others have talked about, you know, the need for a library that serves the public that we have and the future generations to come, while also preserving the history of the building and the space. And for those of you who have been in the building, you know that it has been chopped up and changed over time, and that the architects and the library staff and all of the folks that have been involved in the project have worked incredibly hard to balance sort of the growing needs and the changing needs of the patrons of the library, while also preserving the past. The two things that I want to share, since we're talking about the interior, is that if any of you have been up to the archives in the library, it really is not adequate. And one of the things that I worry about is that, you know, the discussion about size of the building is going to actually prevent us from preserving the historical materials that tell the town story. And so I think there's a funny tension at play around saving the place, but not the things that make up and tell the story of our local community. So I think that everyone has worked very hard to do that. And the other thing that I would mention is that the town actually has a number of these buildings that have worked hard to preserve a past story while also having a modern function. So here at Amherst College, we have 79 South Pleasant Street, which is right down the road from the Jones Library, which is a church in the front, and then a building in the back. And it certainly serves a broad range of people. And what's amazing about it now is it's fully accessible and it's environmentally sustainable, but yet preserves the building that's there. There's also another building like 2 blocks away, the Lyceum, that again is walking this fine line between, you know, preserving the past, serving a modern function, and really supporting the educational mission of the college. So the work that the folks at the Jones Library are doing, I think, is really aligned with what's happening in the community. And I appreciate the efforts that so many people have made to actually make mitigation strategy decisions all throughout this process. So just again, great appreciation, and I look forward to everyone coming to a shared agreement, signing an MOU so we can move forward with this project.
Thanks. I see one last hand raised. Maria, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Getting back to the point at hand here, the handcrafted Philippine mahogany millwork, as well as the floor plan, are character-defining features of an historic building. And according to standard number 5, distinctive materials, features, finishes, and construction techniques are examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property will be preserved. Will be preserved. I want to question, I don't think that even if it is true that 20 to 25% is what is going to be discarded, I would argue that's too high a number. And I have yet to see an explanation for that percentage. By my reading of it, I think the percentage is far higher, but I think 0 should be the goal. And permission to negatively impact millwork and floor plan, according again to the rules here, in rehabilitation, historic building materials and character defining features are protected and maintained as they are in the treatment and preservation. Latitude can be given if these materials are deteriorated, damaged, having issues, but that's not the case. Pains have been taken over the last 100 years to maintain this millwork in excellent condition, and that should remain.
Maria, I'm just going to ask you to wrap up your comments.
Yep. I want to go back to the purpose of the Secretary of Interior standards, which is to provide guidance to building owners, building managers, preservation consultants, architects, contractors, and project reviewers prior to beginning work. Now, this entire process should have happened years ago. It did not happen years ago. And so the concerns that people have about like, oh my gosh, we have to hurry up and get this done, that's neither here nor there. This is an historic building. It should have been done. It wasn't done when it was supposed to be done. And that timing is not an issue. I also just have to say, there may have been 1,000 meetings about this, but when voices of dissent and disagreement have not been allowed inside those meetings and to have an impact, that's 1,000 meetings of people agreeing with each other. And so I don't think that this process over these last many years has adequately taken in these concerns about an historic building and how we should not be harming it. And we could have found a way to do this that everybody could have been happy with, but that didn't happen.
Thank you, Maria. Sarah, did you have one last comment before we continue?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, I did not mean to be disrespectful in saying, that there were 1,000 meetings. I was specifically referring to the webinars that were hosted during the pandemic where people came and talked about the Department of the Interior's treatment. It was really a very educational opportunity. And then we've had folks who lead archives make public presentations and then take questions from the audience. So I think that there's been a lot of really good educational opportunities to help the broader community understand these concepts, which if you've never done historic preservation are kind of confusing when you apply them and what they mean, especially in the context of public buildings. So I just wanted to express some clarity about, my comment, which might have been seen as not helpful.
Thank you, Sarah. I see we have one last hand. I'm going to give you, Bill, just a moment to speak because I know you haven't had a chance to talk yet, but I do want to continue to the next portion of our meeting. So if you could maybe keep it to a minute, that would be great.
Yes, I'll be brief. Thank you so much. So I just had one clarifying comment about the Section 106 review process. There's been a lot of discussion about compliance with Secretary of the Interior standards. I just wanted to note that that is not a requirement of the Section 106 review, that this project or any project meet the SOI rehabilitation standards. Generally, that is the goal to avoid adverse effects, but it's not a requirement. There may be a separate requirement under NEH or HUD grant guidelines or requirements, but I just wanted to be clear that for the purview of Section 106, that's not a requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a perfect segue into what I was going to share now, which is that if you recall the slide where we saw what the adverse effects that have been identified, where there was a new addition, size, scale, and massing. There was loss of 2 interior staircases and changes to circulation, and then loss of 20% original interior. So those being the adverse effects that have been identified, and we've heard a lot about them over the last hour. Does anyone want to offer any specific or possible mitigation measures that you would like to have considered with respect to addressing those adverse effects? This will be the chance to hear from the consulting parties about mitigation measures that haven't been proposed yet, or those that have been proposed. For example, we heard about one with respect to exterior landscaping as a mitigation measure for the mass of the addition. So that's the sort of thing I'd like to turn us to now. And please raise your hand if you have something you'd like to share with respect to possible mitigation measures to address these adverse effects that have been identified. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I just point out that Section 106 goal is not just mitigation, but also avoidance and minimization of the adverse effects. And it's the view of the Amherst Historic Preservation Coalition that the destruction of any Philippine mahogany millwork should be avoided, and the new addition should be significantly downsized and separated from the current historic building. So those are the two resolutions I propose.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any any consulting parties who would like to share possible mitigating measures with respect to the adverse effects that have been identified? Yes, Jenny.
Ginny Hamilton from the Friends of the Library. And for those who don't know, I'm actively involved in the capital campaign, and that is my paid position as a employee of the Friends. And in my research as part of that outreach and planning, I've looked at lots of library capital campaign websites, particularly other historic buildings around the country. One of my favorite examples is a small library, I believe it's in Freeport, Maine, that was much, much smaller than the Jones, but more about the size of the North Amherst Library. And they have used an online virtual tour of their old building, so that you can walk through the old building as the old building existed on their website. And I believe from the 360-degree photography that the architects did early on in this process, we have the footage to be able to do that. So I think as part of the examples of documenting what exists now, I think that could be a nice possibility to show the differences. I know lots of other folks have shared other ideas in our previous meeting and in written comments, but that's one I think is worth mentioning.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll just pause a moment to give anyone who has a thought sort of percolating regarding measures that could be used to mitigate the adverse effects before we move on. Yes, Elizabeth. Oh, you are muted, Elizabeth.
If by mitigation you mean to substitute for it, I don't really see that, but I still think that the architectural details on the front of the building are very important, and that you should put the shutters back on and really do a nice job of restoring that central doorway, which is really the focus of the Amity Street side. And I think it's the thing that everybody in town notices most.
Thank you. Well, thanks to everybody amongst the organizations that are here today as consulting parties for sharing your thoughts. We're going to turn back to Ginny Adams, who can talk to us about what the next steps are going to be with respect to this entire project.
Thank you, Mara. I believe there's a slide for this section, but I would just say that following today's meeting, the next steps are that the town will file the E-106 documentation with the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation. This officially invites the Advisory Council to participate in the consultation process going forward, and they will make that decision and let the town know. The town will also draft a memorandum of agreement for the project as the consultation moves towards resolving the adverse effects. And the MOA will include common stipulations and treatments such as those in the alternatives analysis that I mentioned earlier. And it will also include input from the consultation process, such as what was just mentioned, those kinds of stipulations and treatments. The town will circulate the draft memorandum of agreement to the consulting parties for comment. And then we'll finalize the MOA. And the execution of the memorandum of agreement and its subsequent implementation concludes the Section 106 consultation process. With that, I'll turn it back to Mara.
Thank you. We're going to be moving into the next portion of the meeting now where we hear from the public. And so Jake will be facilitating that portion. But before we do that, I just want to see if our representatives from the Mass Historical Commission or the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners wanted to share any final thoughts. It looks like not, so I'll turn it over to Jake to facilitate the next portion of our meeting, which will be soliciting comment from members of the public who are here today.
Right, thank you so much, Mara. So we will now be moving to the public comment section, where members from the public can have an opportunity to share their thoughts on topics presented as being part of the scope of the meeting today. If you haven't already, please use the raise hand function if you'd like to share a public comment. If you're participating by phone rather than Zoom, you can press *9 on your keypad on your phone, and that will serve as raising your hand. We will ask members of the public to speak in the order of raised hands. Attendees are welcome to express their views for up to 3 minutes if we have 10 or so participants. If we have more than that, 10 to 30, it would be about 2 minutes, and more than that would be 1 minute. When called on, please identify yourself by stating your full name, address, and pronouns. And before we start receiving public comment, I just want to review quickly the norms that we established earlier, which allows us to create a process that is inclusive of different opinions and respectful to all. Our norms are 1, to show respect for other people, 2, to show respect for the space, and 3, to speak for yourself and not for others. All right, and now we will call on members of the public who are signed up for public comment in the order of their raised hands. So first I'll call on Lydia Vernon Jones. You can unmute. Lydia, are you there? You are still muted. You will need to unmute your voice in order for us to be able to hear you. All right, I'm not hearing from Lydia, so why don't we come back to Lydia and move on to the next while Lydia figures out how to unmute. Next up, we have Carol Gray.
Thank you. Carol Gray, 815 Southeast Street, she, her. I was a Jones Library trustee. I chaired the budget committee. I was on the buildings committee. I was on the long range planning committee, which wrote a long range plan a decade ago, which contemplated no need for an addition at the Jones, but one was needed for the North Amherst Library. I founded the Green Committee, which doesn't still exist. I wrote the first proposals for Community Preservation Act funding. And I should also say, I'm also a lawyer, so I care a lot about law. And I recognize that the 106 review does not say that the Secretary's standards are legally binding. However, the Preservation Restriction Agreement says they are legally binding. And I find it alarming, but sadly not surprising in this era we live in where the rule of law is so little respected, that this project has sunk millions into this, this whole plan, which completely violates the Secretary's standards. And that these continue to roll forward. It takes a very brazen government to ignore the law and think that if it's just ignored, they can just keep going. But we see from the federal viewpoint that is an idea that's not new. Anyway, I raise this because I really appreciated Ms. Simon's report that listed the standards. Standard 2, the historic character of the property will be retained and preserved. Clearly, that's completely violated. You're taking away the woodwork. You're destroying the director's office, which was where Robert Frost would store his manuscripts in the safe there. Key elements of the historic character are being wiped away. That violates standard 2. Standard 5, distinctive materials, features will be preserved. Maria Kopicki and others have elaborated eloquently on how distinctive features are being destroyed. Standard 9, there's no way to get around this. New additions will not destroy the historic materials, features, spatial relationships that characterize the property. The massing of this addition absolutely dwarfs the historic building. There is no way that could ever comply with the Secretary's standards. The last standard, standard 10, new additions and adjacent or related new constructions will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. How can we possibly think that any amount of tweaking adverse effects will make that okay? You can't remove this new addition without destroying the whole building. And somehow it's just become, sorry, there's a music playing, if someone could mute themselves.
Carol,
Okay.
that was the end of the 3 minutes, so please take a moment to wrap up your comments. Thank you.
I'll wrap up to say it would take a lot of courage for people to call this like it is. Ms. Simon was absolutely right in saying the standards are violated. People should stick to that, and they should start carrying that if sued, the town will lose a lawsuit on the preservation restriction agreement, which says it must be strictly adhered to. The Secretary's standards must be strictly adhered to. You can't ignore the law forever. And if you're sued, you're going to just waste millions more. It will take courage to say no to this.
Carol. Thank you, Carol, for your comments. Next up, we have Mickey. And Mickey, please unmute when you have a chance, and then you can share your comment.
Try this again.
There we go, Mickey.
Audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mickey, we can hear you.
All right. Yeah, I just want to say, just to start, the Section 106 review process is meant to encourage robust, active, full public participation. And I think setting a fixed ending time for this meeting and limiting comments to 1 minute is really thwarting public participation. So I will keep my comment short. My name is Mickey Rathbun. I live at 666 Southeast Street in Amherst. My comment is addressed to the massing size and scale of the proposed addition. The town has conceded that the addition will have an adverse effect on the Jones Library, but the town claims that the need for more space outweighs the interest in historic preservation. That claim needs to be seriously scrutinized. The Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation of historic buildings includes specific guidelines regarding additions. Quote, new additions should be considered only after it is determined that meeting specific new needs cannot be achieved by altering non-character defining interior spaces, end quote. The town never undertook this inquiry. When the MHC asked for the town's alternatives analysis regarding the massing size and scale of the addition, the town's response was that additional space was needed for programming. That is not a sufficient response. A 2012 space planning report conducted by the Mass Library System concluded that with some specific space reassignments, the existing library would have ample room to fulfill its functions well into the future. This plan was never seriously considered. The town's claimed need for more space was based on a grossly inflated estimate of the library user population. The 51,000 user figure included not just the town's 20,000 full-time residents, but also more than 20,000 UMass students and other college students who have several excellent libraries on their campuses and are unlikely to use the Jones Library. And the number of actual users of the Jones has decreased dramatically. MBLC statistics show that the number of annual visitors to the Jones Library has fallen from 319,000 in 2014 to 143,000 in 2023. That's a cut of more than half in 9 years. Compared with the 47 similarly sized town libraries in the state, the Jones has more than adequate space to serve its user population. Very few of these towns have a branch library, much less 2 branch libraries, or the numerous university and college libraries that the town of Amherst has. If
Mickey, your
expanded by
the timer went off, so I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments shortly, please.
All right. The town will probably argue that it's too late to examine the actual need for the addition. As the town was well aware, the Section 106 review process should have been conducted early in the planning stages so that a detailed analysis of space and need could have been done. But because the Section 106 review is only now underway, now is the time, in fact, it's the only time, to take a closer look at the town's alternatives analysis regarding the massing scale and size of the addition. The MHC should insist that the town demonstrate the need for the expansion before this plan goes any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. Our next attendee to speak will be Lou Conover.
Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Lou.
Can you hear me? Okay, very good. Thank you. In the 1960s, a German architectural firm started the notion of an open office, a large open space, and that was pretty soon extended to primary schools and libraries. So that they got rid of interior walls and groups of people would share a large open space. This in offices went out of style. We now have cubicles so that people actually do have separate spaces. At a minimum, many offices have gone back to having separate rooms. In primary schools, a lot of open classroom primary schools have built walls, including the 2 primary schools in Amherst, Wildwood and Fort River. They decided that the teachers decided that, and the school administration decided it just wasn't going to work. The fashion of building libraries as large open spaces is exactly that, a fashion. And what I'm concerned about is that at some time in the future, it may be discovered that smaller spaces, individual spaces, are really preferable. And at that point, if we have basically torn the inside out of the Jones Library, it won't be possible to restore the functionality that it has now. So this project is going to take a historically useful building, destroy that utility with the way it was perceived at one time for something that may turn out to be a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, for your comment. Next, we'll hear from Letitia LaFollette.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Letitia LaFollette, 18 Dana Street in Amherst. It is a pleasure and a privilege to speak on behalf of the Jones Renovation Project. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I believe strongly in this project and the good it will bring the town of Amherst. I am not concerned about the adjustments to the historic fabric of the Jones that are needed for the project. To be clear, the historic preservation losses are well worth it for the overall project and the town's gain. What really matters to me is that the Jones Library continue to serve as the heart and community center of the town of Amherst well into the 21st century. It is having great difficulty doing that right now, and this project ensures that it will be able to do so in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Letitia. Next up, Nancy Campbell.
Yes, this is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Nancy Campbell, 369 Middle Street in Amherst. 100 years ago, Amherst residents collected stones from their fields and surrounding lands to build the mighty walls of the Jones Library. The original stones are still in place and will likely remain so for hundreds of years to come. Today, more than 500 residents have instead come forward with pledges of over $10 million and counting to ensure the longevity of the Jones as a beautiful historic building, but it has to become an efficient, multi-purpose 21st century public library. I think the delicate balance between old and new, both for the interior and the exterior, has been respected in the current plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. I want to circle back to Lydia to see if Lydia has figured out how to unmute and share her perspective. Lydia?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't really need to raise my hand before, and I'm sorry it paused the meeting. But since you asked me again, I will say that as a climate change activist, I don't think we can move ahead without considering the adverse effects of building this addition and tearing down the other addition to climate change and the responsibility that the town of Amherst has to the entire world in terms of the adverse effects there. They seem to have been lost in the conversation over the last couple of years. And so I would like people to open their eyes and think about the future and consider what our responsibility is in terms of the climate and the and the preservation of our society and our plants and animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Next, we have someone whose name just says iPad.
Oh, that's me because I got the, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
That was me, I guess. My name is Hilda Greenbaum, 298 Montague Road. And I'm speaking on behalf of my late husband, who was a historian, a European historian, and a trustee of the Jones Library, who, when he first heard of this project, already was telling the architects, you're making a mistake. And nobody, from then on, nobody has bothered to try to make any kind of an accommodation with any of us who would like to try to make the right addition to this library. What is disturbing me the most today is that I'm only hearing from the, I hate to call it the other side, but it's the people who are in favor of making this addition. I don't see any sense in them that they want to make any kind of an accommodation at all in fixing an ugly building, I'm sorry to say that, but in fact it is, that has no relation to the old building. It impacts negatively on 3 historic districts. And I don't hear anything coming from the other side that they're willing to try to negotiate what that building should look like. And we've been trying to do this now for a very long time and nobody's been listening. I want to say that an application of my husband and I over the last 65 years has been historic preservation, and we've saved over 24 old houses and put them back on the tax rolls at considerable higher value than they had as old houses that were falling apart and not well maintained. So I do have a little bit of sensitivity of what the addition should look like, and what it looks like now to me is not adequate. And in terms of mitigation, what I'm thinking of, the first thing on the list was they want to document and put in archives. Well, that's to me is the same issue of going to the, or equivalent to going to the cemetery and looking at a stone of somebody who's dead and long gone and never coming back. The craftsmanship and quality of the materials used in this house were the best that were available in 1928, and they are irreplaceable. I think from the beginning, and if you look at the website from this architect, you'll see that their additions do not bear much respect in terms of the old buildings that they're attached to.
Since your timer has elapsed. So
I just want to say that I think you picked the wrong architect, and if you want to go see something that looks really good, go look at the new addition to the North Amherst Library. That was the right architect and the right builder, and that addition fits in with that 1893 building almost perfectly. And this one is 180 degrees opposite. And I think there needs to be some
Thank you so
feeling
much
on
for your
your
comment.
side
I'm
to
sorry, I'm gonna
compromise.
need to cut you off so that we have time for everyone to speak and everyone has equal amount of time to speak. Thank you so much for your comment. Next up, we'll hear from Warren.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Warren Graham, 16 Applewood Lane in Amherst. I appreciate it that the people who are planning this expansion and renovation are working hard at preserving the character of this building, this historic building that we have and love, and are working at improving the library at the same time to meet the needs of the 21st century for people like all of us. I believe the planned mitigations will be successful and worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Warren. Next, we'll hear from Bonnie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I am a retired academic librarian. I am a past president of the Friends of the Jones Library, and I and my family have been regular users of the Jones Library for over 50 years, through 3 generations now. I just, as an aside, I can say that college students do use the Jones Library, and that an academic library is not the same thing as a public library at all. They are very different things, and we are talking about a library now for a community. The role of the library in any community has changed dramatically over the last 100 years, and this community in Amherst has changed dramatically. From the time of the original building in the 1920s, and also over the last 25 years, from the time that the library attempted another change in the year 2000. This is a very complex and dynamic town, and a library needs to be designed to meet that. The present library is wonderful for maybe for people my age, but it does not meet the needs of everyone in this community. It really does not. Some original features may have to be lost, but we really, really, really need this change. need this renovation. I think the balance between old and new that is presented in the library plans, it may not be perfect, and it certainly is not to everyone's taste. I certainly understand that. But we really, really need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Arlie, we'll hear from you next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I heard that if the addition were to be made smaller, that would put the MBLC contributions at risk. I was just wondering if it was possible to move some programming to a different location if the MBLC would still be willing to support a smaller addition. As was mentioned, we are about to have a lot of other space open up in the town that is community space. So I was just wondering about that. In terms of the environmental impact, that is something I've thought about. I've heard a statistic that the demolition of the 93 addition in order to put this new one up, something like 1,660 tons of landfill is going to be created by that. So that the idea of the greenest building is really the building that's already standing. All the benefits that may come from this addition will take a long time to really be realized just by that initial demolition. So you understand what I'm saying, that it's not going to make up, that won't be made up for quite a while in terms of the environmental. And the last thing I'll say is the town was very adamant about, you know, the slate, the synthetic slate in the book drop, and it moved to not doing those things. So hopefully there's a little bit of wiggle room around this size and massing and possibly interior. If the paneling, maybe that has to be taken away, could be preserved in some way, or at least some part of it preserved, not just photographically, but actually and stored in some way. I hear that. That would be nice. And my last thing is, I heard that the book sorter would be coming at some point. So if in the MOA, we could have a promise to never put a hole in the facade of the building, put the book sorter somewhere else, put a hole somewhere else maybe, but not in the facade. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlie. Next, we'll hear from Bruce Penniman.
Hello, my name is Bruce Penniman. I live at 50 South Mount Holyoke Drive, and my pronouns are he and him. My wife Valerie and I are strong supporters of the library addition project. We have been using the library, and our children have used it, and we're both retired teachers from Amherst. Our students have used it for over 50 years. We have seen the need for this project to meet the 21st century requirements of a public library. And we have talked with people who are involved in the project and seen the hard work that's gone into mitigating the historical damage or effects that might happen to it, and balancing that with the needs of the library. We have contributed to the capital campaign and really want to see this project move forward. In listening to the discussion today, I think it seems to me that there is a tension between whether that we are talking about the Jones Library or the Jones Museum. And I think we can all agree that we need a library, not just a historic house in the center of town. And a library has to change with the times and has to have the upgrades that are needed to meet a new generation of users. So I hope that this project can move forward as soon as possible. I'm sure that people of goodwill can talk about the finer points of whether the shutters are installed and the pineapple is restored on the front of the building. But I think the major aspects of this project should go forward as they have been planned. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Next, we'll hear from Rebecca Nordstrom.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Nordstrom. I live on 39 Dana Street, and I use she, her pronouns. And I just wanted to say I continue to be in complete support of the renovation and expansion project as it has evolved. And I'm persuaded that the current plans, including the mitigation that's already been mentioned, do indeed strike the right balance between the functionality needed to serve our community and the historic preservation that I think we all desire to maintain. So just wanted to say that and to thank everybody who's worked so hard on this for so long.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next, I'll hear from Shalini.
Hi, Shalini Bell, 78 Linden Ridge Road, Amherst, pronounced she, her. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking as a resident today, but as a former town councillor. Having been involved with this project for 5 years, I want to acknowledge the fundamental tension we face, balancing the historic preservation with the functional requirements of a 21st century library. And these competing needs require thoughtful compromise. And I feel we're lucky to have a team of thoughtful and creative project team, trustees, building committees, so many residents, volunteers who have been listening and participating and have already made significant accommodations to address the historic preservation concerns, such as committing to a natural slate roofing. However, we must acknowledge that each delay increases costs, which ultimately reduces what we can provide to our community. The state funding and financial support we've secured represents a rare opportunity that we can't afford to lose. The current design wasn't arrived at lightly. It represents a decade of careful planning and community input, culminating in strong voter support. 2/3 of the people supported it. And as Frost Library's representative today from Amherst College noted, modern libraries need space for contemporary services and programming. We can't squeeze a 21st century library into a 20th century footprint without severely compromising its functionality. And it was clarifying to hear from Andrea from MBLC today that the proposed space requirements aren't arbitrary. They're essential for the library to function, and the architects have already been working with the MBLC and minimize the footprints. So the solution is supported by a remarkable number of organizations that we heard from today. And while I understand concerns about additions visibility from historic districts and loss of the 25% of the wooden paneling, or maybe slightly more, I think we've reached a thoughtful compromise that respects our history while serves our future needs. The time has come to focus on solution. I like the background to my final statement. The time has come to focus on solutions and not further delays. Let's move forward with this carefully considered plan, and that will serve all of residents for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini. Next, we'll hear from Rebecca Nordstrom.
Oh, I already spoke.
Okay, your hand was risen again.
Oh, I see. Let me lower it.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Anita Saro. And it looks like Anita is not speaking right now. So next I'll hear from Kelly.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you, Anita. And then we'll hear from
Okay,
Kelly after. Sorry about
I'm
that.
very sorry I pressed the wrong button. I just want to say up front that I am a long-term resident of Amherst and a longtime user of the Jones Library of both myself and my children as they grew up. I fully support the longevity of the Jones Library, and I want to see it a functional and safe place. But this proposal is flawed for all the reasons that we have talked about and others have talked about. It is not only inadequate to preserve the historic elements of the building, but it is based on questionable numbers of usage and far bigger than what is needed. It is simply not adequately justified for both the size or sacrificing the historic elements that are being proposed. This process is not just about mitigation, but we haven't been talking about avoidance, and I would hope that there would be a real consideration of robust renovation of parts of the library that have been neglected for many years, stabilization of the building, and the utilization of existing space that has not been used for many years. So it is possible to avoid the worst of the violation of historic elements. And I do ask that it is not too late to consider alternatives to the plan that is inadequately mitigated by all of the suggestions.
Thank you so much. And next we'll hear from Kelly.
No, you didn't give it back to me. Oh, good. Okay, so I guess I was already unmuted. Thank you. This is Kelly Irwin from South Amherst. And I would like to say, can people please try to imagine a situation where the new library has opened its doors and you walk in and you admire all of the historic aspects that have been preserved and in many cases enhanced. The beautiful upstairs reading rooms that will be restored, the gorgeous paneling and door frames and fireplaces that are still there, the complete sense of history. As you then stroll into a new section of the library, offering you the computers, the handicapped accessible stacks, the cafe, the children's activity room, all of the things that we so need and do not have now. And be able to say, we all compromised, we all gave up some things, there's some things we're not thrilled with, but overall, this is a beautiful new library, and we're so happy to be melding the old, mitigating all the damage we can, and yet building something new and beautiful as well. Please, let's all imagine that beautiful day when the door opens and we all go, wow, what were we arguing about? Thank goodness we have our new library. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Next, we'll hear from Dale.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My name is Dale Peterson. After decades of deferred maintenance, the town of Amherst desperately needs an accessible, accommodating, and inclusive building. The present structure is not accessible because it is a rabbit warren of corridors and half staircases. It is not accommodating because as the hub of the center of the town, it serves so many different constituencies. It serves ESL students, those who are studying to pass the citizenship exam. It serves teenagers, it serves homeless people, And the building is cramped and claustrophobic. It simply cannot spatially accommodate the present needs, let alone the needs in the next 25 years. And it is not even able to preserve the fundamental archives of the town because the special exhibit room is subject to leakage from the air conditioning service. So the present situation is intolerable. I don't know how the staff manages to be as accessible and as efficient as they are. I want to commend the trustees of Amherst College for their attentiveness at so many public meetings and their responsiveness to constructive criticisms. We desperately need this viable new building. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Now we'll hear from Josie Patterson.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm Josie Patterson. I live at 148 Lincoln Avenue, and I go by the pronoun she and her. I've only lived here for 3 years, but I used to live in Cambridge, where I lived most of my life. And that library, it was new and it was in a renovated historic building. And I'm just saying that I'm so impressed there by how many new people came into the building. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Josie. And now we'll hear from David Lithgow. And David, you're still muted, so we're not able to hear you right now.
Jake, I'm going to try and pull him in. It's Angela. I'm going to try and pull him into the panelist room and see if that might fix the problem.
Thank you.
So it's Angela again. I've given him 3 requests to join us in the panelist room, and I've asked him to unmute 3 times.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Is there anyone else from the community who would like to offer a public comment who has not had the opportunity to do so already? And if so, you could please raise your hand. All right, thank you everyone so much for offering your
So
public.
it's Angela again. I'm sorry to interrupt. I think Mr.
This is
Lithgow
David
just-
Lithgow. Can you hear me now?
There
Yes,
you go.
I can hear you, David. Glad you could join.
My iPad Touch has not been working properly. I just want to comment quickly that how impressed I've been over the years by the way the democratic process has worked. We've got elected representatives who spent years soliciting expertise to establish facts and sort out opinion from fact. and they came up with a remarkable plan over years for this library, including a financial plan to finance 4 capital projects with a finance committee that started building up reserves years ago so that the library could be funded with no impact on local tax rates. I was extraordinarily impressed by this process of representative democracy. I was a little bit disturbed when the town council, after an overwhelming vote to go forward, was challenged by a petition. 5% of the population of the voters voted to reconsider by referendum. It was then put to the full town by referendum, and the town voted 65% to go forward with the process. A wonderful display of the democratic process. We have now listened to years of input, and I've spent 5 years now trying to sort fact from opinion, and I strongly support going ahead, and I hope the democratic process shortly concludes before we pet this dog to death. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. And I'll turn it to you, Mara, to close this out.
Thanks, Jake. Oh, I appreciate that everyone from our consulting parties to members of the public participated and shared their feedback. Thank you so much. If it didn't feel comfortable sharing your feedback for whatever reason, there is an opportunity to submit written comment through the town's Section 106 webpage. The link to do so was posted with the announcement for this meeting and in the slide deck as well. While comments are always welcome, people wishing to share ideas for the MOA are asked to submit them no later than this Thursday, January 30th at noon. And that concludes the facilitated portion of the public meeting. Oh, I see that someone has their hand raised.
Yeah, excuse me, there's another attendee that has their hand raised.
Oh, thank you so much, Maria. So Ken Rosenthal, member of the public, has raised his hand. Ken, can you unmute and speak, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Ken Rosenthal. I live on Sunset Avenue. I'm a strong supporter of the library, and I've been a user of the library as a resident of Amherst for over 50 years. And I want to point out a problem that is caused not by anything having to do architecturally or historically, but planning for the use of the library. For one thing, we've heard that the number of people who need to use it has been reducing, and the library itself has reduced the number of volumes of paper materials, and that's because the use of libraries have changed. But there's also been something that's proposed for the library that's never been done before. This town is fortunate to have received in 1893 8 granite tablets to memorialize the names of the 300 residents of town, black and white, who fought for the North during the Civil War. These were tablets that were given to commemorate those people. Now there is a proposal to put those tablets in a basement room in the library where they will be forever lost on the days when they are most important to be seen. This library is closed for at least 31 days of the year, including summer Sundays, including holidays like the just concluded Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and the Sundays before those holidays. Those are just the very days when people would come to want to see and acknowledge and commemorate their relatives and people they may have known or would like to know about, black and white, who served the North during the Civil War. There are other places in this town where these tablets could be seen 24 hours a day, 365 and a quarter days a year. I can name those. I'll do that at a time when I have more minutes. But I want to point out that the fact that a volume of the library has been used to misplace these 8 wonderful granite tablets from 1893 means that that's why the library is over the time purpose. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. I will put this in writing and submit it.
Thank you. And we do have one consulting party, Anika, whose hand is raised and who did not speak earlier. So if time allows, I'd like to give them a chance to speak.
Hi, yes, I'll be brief. I really have a comment, more than anything else about historical preservation. My memories do not exist really before, the Jones Library. And as Michael Pill had pointed out, my family, which do represent every last name of the Black and Indigenous soldiers who are on the Civil War tablets, both predate this town. And also, were the folks who did definitely serve in the 54th Regiment, the 5th Cavalry, folks who have been redlined around the historic district, folks who were not part of the audience that the Jones Library was initially opened for. And here we do have an opportunity to not only include and center the Native American history, but also the Black and Afro-Indigenous history, which has not been included, which for many years throughout much of the back and forth with the library has not been brought back and center. Front and center rather throughout these conversations, and does seem to kind of be thrown in as an afterthought. I think we have a wonderful opportunity to not only look into and appreciate our historic preservation, but also look forward to needs of community and for future generations. What are we actually bringing forward, and who are we opening these doors for? And I certainly hope that this conversation can move back from sides and center into what opportunities we have from special collections, which have historically and to this date into today do not center all of the voices and the accurate history, the people who did build this town, and all of them together. And we do have an opportunity to do that, and to do that right and together. As an arts and cultural hub, there's so much of our arts and culture and music and everything else that we do not have available for the center of town. And I do not believe that it is the university or the college's responsibility to do that for our community. Our community longs for it. I was just with students today that are not aware of so much of Amherst history that's here, and you certainly do not hear it throughout these conversations. So I do hope that we can move forward from side A and side B. Our community, and most importantly, our future generations, deserve more and better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anika. And I do believe Christine was going to conclude the meeting. Is Christine still here? And if not, was someone going to speak in her stead?
Mara, I need to bring her back over from the attendee room. It's Angela.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Christine, we're turning the floor over to you to conclude the meeting.
Thank you. Angela, are the other members going to be moved over?
They're moving over kind of slowly.
All right, I'll give it a moment. And then, first of all, thank you, everyone. It's hard when there's long meetings, but good work, and appreciate everyone's time. We're going to be moving to the fourth item on the last page of the agenda. That section is topics not anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance, which I have none, so there'll be nothing under that part. And looking under participants also. Angela, you tell me when you've ported everybody over.
I'm just giving a final look at the attendee list. I'm sorry.
I am too. Thank you. I see.
So I do know that Pam Rooney had to leave early, and I know that Alex also had an appointment, Alex Lefebvre.
Okay.
So
And
I think
I don't see any members in the attendees right now.
Right.
So you done good. Thank you, Angela. So I will move to item 5, which is the adjournment of this meeting. So I say meeting ended at 5:21. Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela. A lot of work. Thank you.